Some of the most impressive art that we have in North America is from the Northwest Coast. This is a strip of land running approximately 1,500 miles along the territory, northern border right here of California, all the way up through to the Alaskan Panhandle. The deal with this region is that it's very, very rich in resources. Maybe you can get an idea of that from the photograph I have of the territory. We have the sea, which is incredibly bountiful, particularly salmon, which becomes a basic element of the diet. But we also have animals such as otter, for example. In addition to that, we have the trees, the woods, the land animals, and all of the plants. Consequently, the folks in the Northwest Coast are able to create an economy for themselves that is flourishing. Because of this, used as a base, the economy allows the folks to create a very complex ceremonialism and very strong social classes. In other words, the wealth allows them to construct complexity of society, and it gives them the time to do it. And they're going to do this without investing in agriculture because the natural resources are plentiful. Because of the stratified society that results from this accumulation of wealth, we have artworks that support the rituals, and these rituals support the social classes. As a result of that, the overriding quality of the artworks is important. They are consistently well crafted because their craftsmanship is a reference to the status of the owner. Because of the richness of the woodlands, much Northwest Coast art is made out of wood and is therefore perishable. That applies to the rather famous totem poles that probably all of Americans are familiar with. And in here in the lower right, you can see one that's fallen. These were never created to be permanent. They were created to be display objects during the lifetime of the tree. Once the tree was cut and carved, the pole was finished. It would actually take more work and more resources to attempt to restore one of the totem poles than to carve another and start again. So, what we have to do to go back in time and see what some of these poles look like was return to photographs that were taken. In this case, the one that you have, and I think it is exactly the same one that you have in O'Reilly, and that is figure 850 in our textbook, and it's the one top left. There are a series of these photographs. Most of these were taken during basically tourist trips as people were cruising around the waters. And consequently, we have something of a record of these poles, which are pretty impressive and magnificent. Originally painted, these totem poles could go up to 60 feet. They're large, they were colorful, and they were intended to be seen or to be viewed. And that's the reason that they're placed across the water's edge, so that people who are going by back in the day, traveling, would be able to view the totem poles. These totem poles are created in a variety of types. The one that O'Reilly has included are mortuary poles, but let's take a look at the list of types. There are a variety of totem poles. The one at the bottom of the list, mortuary totem poles, which would be O'Reilly's inclusion. These totem poles are made specifically to commemorate the dead and contain in a compartment the ashes of the deceased. Usually, these totem poles are restricted to a single individual within the family clan. And I have to stress the importance of these poles because a status that you have as an individual does depend upon your ancestry. So, what we're doing is commemorating an individual of status and importance who gives meaning and status and importance to the living. Okay, that's one kind of pole. We also have at the top of the list a crest pole. This is often incorporated into a house. I'm not sure that it has to. It does reference the ancestors of the family and functions as an emblem for the clan itself. This is something I want to talk about specifically in terms of the beliefs of the Northwest Coast because crest images are incredibly important. They define who we are and show to everyone what our rights within society would be. The third one, storytelling poles. These are common as well. These might be poles that are made to commemorate a particular event, such as on my list, which I've borrowed from the web. A wedding, anything that is historical, a particularly important chief taking authority, for example. And they're also used to make fun of people who don't behave well. They're particularly famously known for ridiculing bad debtors, people who don't pay back what they owe. So be very careful because if you don't follow the rules of etiquette, you might end up on a totem pole. What is a totem pole? Well, first of all, it is made from a tree, so it is a pole. Each of these is derived from a single tree. And each of them has a spiritual significance. According to the definition I've given us, a totem is anything that is believed to have spiritual significance. It's respected, and it's often respected as an emblem. It's something symbolic, it's something sacred. We don't worship these things. These totem poles were never worshiped, but they were highly respected and they were imbued with a spiritual power because of what was carved on them. And the images carved on these totem poles often deal with the mythology of the Northwest Coast and often deal with the ancestry of the people of the Northwest Coast. That's what gives these poles their power. This is an introduction to a storytelling pole, a pole that depicts one of the important myths that is part of Native American beliefs in the Northwest Coast. It is the story of Raven stealing the sun. Before we look at the story, I'd like to point out elements of style. Northwest Coast art is very boldly carved. The forms are clear and very strong. There are flat areas of color, and the overall creation, you can see some of the paint remaining on this pole. The overall creation consists of abstracted areas of color that are separated. Forms are also separated by lines. These are referred to as form lines. It's fairly traditional to have big, bold eyebrows on these figures. And in this case, the eyebrows, this image right here, is actually the sun. The eyebrows here curve down and echo the shape of the mouth of the sun. This is also symmetrical and fairly formal. The images wrap around the totem pole, and I think it would be fair to describe these as crafted in high relief. This is the totem pole along with the sign that is placed next to it if you make it to Ketchikan in Alaska. It tells the story of Raven stealing the sun. Raven's an important mythological figure. He is a trickster, but he's also a cultural hero, and he's responsible for bringing us the sun, the moon, and the stars. So without Raven, we wouldn't have these things. There are various versions of this story, but the bottom line is Raven manages to trick grandfather, and he is the chief, who owns and keeps in boxes the sun, the moon, and the stars. Raven tricks grandfather into opening the boxes and releasing those treasures for all of humankind. How does Raven do this? Well, he manages, and there are versions of how this happens, he manages to be born into the family and be the grandchild of Grandpa Chief. And Raven, as a child, cries and cries and cries. The grandfather, the chief, dotes on his grandson, wants to do anything he can to make the kid happy. And clearly, the only thing he has left to do is open these boxes to give them as toys to Raven. As soon as that happens, Raven absconds with the treasures and, according to one version, flies up the chimney with them. And early on, his feathers were white, but because he flies up the chimney, which is filled with soot, to get away, in this case with the sun, his feathers are permanently tainted and are blackened. And Raven, for that reason, is a blackbird today. What do we have on the pole? We have our chief. In his hat is, I'm going to say, the baby raven as a human. Then we have the daughter of the chief, who is part of the story. In some instances, she gives birth to Raven. This is the son. And then up on the top, we have the image of Raven himself, fulfilling the parts of the story of the myth of Raven stealing the sun and giving it to the world. This is another pole. It also incorporates Raven. Let me put this into context in terms of family crests. There are also crest poles, and those crest poles literally document the family history. You can think of them as parallel to European family crests. And to understand these, we need to know the fundamental beliefs or the mythology of the Northwest Coast. It is still believed that back in the day, humans and animals were able to communicate, were able to connect with each other, and sometimes even change forms and intermarry. What the Northwest Coast people do is trace their living members of the society back to their ancestors who had these mythic encounters with, in this pole, for example, if we go right here, we can see Raven. We can also see Frog, and I think this is Raven again. So this pole would claim connection to two important figures in mythology. One is Raven and one is Frog. By claiming this ancestry to these mythic beings from the past, you claim social status within the community. You also claim the rights to perform certain rituals that are associated with Raven and with Frog. And you own certain chants and songs. You also own your own history, which you do perform publicly. These poles then become kind of mnemonic devices, recording your history without writing. This is another example in the New World where writing is not required to record history. There are other ways of doing that, and one of them would be with crest poles. Here is a totem pole for you from the University of Pennsylvania Museum. I'd like you to know this because I know you can actually get a chance to see it. It is preserved in the museum, so we also know that it's going to be around for a while. It's only about 25 feet in height. You can get a scale shot. This is someone in the museum standing next to it. But it is still a substantial work of art, and it is a piece dated to the late 19th century from, at least that's the way Penn is dating this. It is also a crest pole. Now, we don't know the exact story because that's been lost. We can no longer read the pole, but I can break some of the figures down for us. There is an individual at the very top, this guy right up here, and he's wearing a Klan hat. He would represent one of the members of the Klan, almost certainly the individual who's a founder of the Klan or associated with his connection to the Klan or crest animals on the pole. Directly underneath him is Raven, and I think you can see the beak of Raven projecting outward. Raven's wings come down. These are Raven's feet, but wait a minute. They're more than Raven's feet. They're also the ears of another creature, and that creature is Baby Bear, and these are the paws of Baby Bear. In other words, part of the elements of style of these poles is that the forms are fused and move seamlessly from one creature to another, sometimes even double dipping on body parts so that they are interconnected. And that speaks to the whole idea of the belief system that back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean before time, when animals and humans could connect with each other, they too could exchange forms and perhaps communicate, perhaps even intermarry. Baby bear is perched on the head of mama bear, whose very, very long tongue seems to come down and turn into sea lion. So, what is this poll about? Well, I can't tell you the exact stories because we don't know those any longer. But what we do know is that this clan originally would have been able to trace its ancestry through probably the cultural hero on top, the human being, to raven, to bear, and to sea lion, making it a very, very powerful crest displaying the history and rights and status of the family. Let me end by saying that these traditions survive today and, in fact, are actually being revitalized and strengthened. So, when you travel in the future to the Northwest Coast, you should be able to see a totem pole.